All right, welcome everybody to the Boating Advisory Council meeting held this Tuesday, March 14th, 2023. I am Vice Chair Olson, and let's see, we will now call to order. Let's see, was there another piece of this that I needed? Just go through the attendance. Okay, so Lana, we'll start with you for attendance. So we have Lana Vassar? Visser, sorry. As well as myself, Chair Olson, Robert Pete here, and it looks like we have George online with us here, George Summer, online representing fishing.
Yep.
Let's see, what next?
Then we'll excuse Richard Walsh, who has stepped down.
Okay, and at this time, we'd like to excuse Richard Walsh, who has stepped down as chair.
And the sailing.
And as the sailing representative.
And then also we'll excuse Bill Mason, who's the motorboat representative.
And we'd also like to excuse Bill Mason, who is the motorboat representative. And at this time, with that, we do have quorum. So we would like to go ahead and, at this time, if you've all had a chance to approve the agenda, if we could go ahead and get that agenda approved right now by a vote.
All first.
Okay, Robert Pete first that. Do we? And Lana will second that. Okay, so all those in favor of approving the agenda, say aye.
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 Okay, the agenda is approved. At this time, we'd also like to approve the minutes from our last meeting, March 8th, 2022. Do we have someone to nominate that?
All first.
First that. Thank you, Robert. And then do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, perfect. So all those who can vote in approval of that.
For those of you, the microphone is what makes it into the official recording of the part too. So
Oh, okay.
if the light is red, it's muted. If you're making a motion or a comment, if you just tap that button, it will turn green.
Okay. Thank
Our
you.
attorneys are pleased.
Thank you.
I didn't know I had to push button.
Okay, so we did have that firsted by Robert Pete, and Lana would second that. So those that can approve the minutes from our last meeting, say aye.
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 Perfect. Thank you. And at this time, we'd like to welcome any public comments at this time. Okay, no public comments. So I will now turn the time over.
Yep.
Are we there? Okay, I'll turn the time over to Ty Hunter.
All right, thanks. Lot that has happened. A lot that's happened over the last 2 years. I know last year there was a lot of uncertainty in our meeting. What I was discussing and where we kind of came from, we went fresh out of having the separation of recreation from state parks to where we were at that point in time. I think we were just finished up a legislative session that renamed us. So the first one was the separation from the Division of Parks and Recreation, which turned it into the Division of State Parks and the Division of Recreation. And then when we had our meeting, we just went through and had a new name change, which just moved it to the Division of Outdoor Recreation, which we are currently, that's our current name for our division, Division of Outdoor Recreation and the Boating Program. And there was some questions about what is happening with the Boating Advisory Council. Don't worry, that was a little bit of confusion on my perspective, on my behalf with that. So Advisory Council is good in standing. There is a sunset set for next year for the Boating Advisory Council, which we have to apply for and make sure that that sunset's removed next year on that. So your council still stays together with this so we can move on past the 2024 session. Big updates. Well, I guess I should be getting before here. I jumped ahead on the schedule here, so I went to 2.1 on our schedule. We need to go back to 2 and have our new director, Jason Curry, introduce himself. So.
Well, thanks, Ty. And yeah, just to introduce myself, I'm Jason Curry. I'm the new director here at the Division of Outdoor Recreation. And Thanks. Thanks for being on the council and serving, putting in the time and everything that's needed to take care of all things boating in Utah. It's a big deal. Utah and our boating, the popularity is just continuing to increase. And so I see that as going nowhere but up, and especially with some of the things that Ty is going to talk about that happen in the general session. There's bigger and better things to come for boating. So appreciate you. I value this group a lot and look forward to seeing a full membership again here shortly, and the products that you all put together. So thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you, Jason. I'm going to go through and do some updates, division updates. I started in that. I'll get back into that swing. I'm sorry, I was really excited to kind of explain where we're going to go, because there's a lot of cool things that are going to be coming. So I'll make it quick so we can make sure that Shane, we can get the meat and potatoes of what Shane needs to tell us, so we're all legal with things, and then get to a real big purpose of why we're here today is to take care of the grants that have been submitted for the boating access. But to get into some things, so as of last year when we met, we had Becky Steinfels that was here as a secretary. Shortly after that meeting, Becky resigned with it. So that was on the end, towards the end of April that Becky resigned. And we were able to replace Becky with Megan Risbon, which was about mid-July this last year. Well, Megan resigned in about mid-December with such. So it's kind of been leaving us without somebody to help us out with the programs and as in essence answering phones and such for the division. With that being, as most of us have stepped up with things, and we've had phone calls diverted. We've had a call, I wouldn't call it a call tree, but there's options in there. They can hit this for boating, hit that for off-highway vehicles, for general questions, hit this. And so it's been forwarded to our cell phones, and we've been taking those calls. We are very, very we are very excited that we have a replacement for both Becky and Megan with this, J.C. Bailey. J.C. will be starting this next Monday, or actually, well, effective date's this Saturday, which is the 18th with that, but she'll probably be in person on Monday with that. We're excited to welcome her aboard, and just, it'll be awesome to be able to have that help and the experience that she'll bring to the table and help us out with. Now, there'll be some other things that I'll talk about further that'll probably change on who will kind of be overseeing and help doing more of the organizational, secretarial, maybe babysitting of us in the group, making sure that we're taken care of. And I don't mean that derogatory, but just to keep us in line and keep our paperwork and stuff going. So that's kind of there. One deal, when we have somebody in here, I want to introduce Steve. This is one of the cool things is that we've been able to stand up a very small law enforcement staff in our new division with that. And so I'd like to take a second and have our new chief, Steve Bullock, introduce himself. Are you going to get that one there? Thanks, Steve.
Am I welcome to sit at the table? Is that okay? Hey, my name is Steve Bullock. I'm our law enforcement chief for Division of Outdoor Recreation. When they split our agencies, Pit Grew, who was the former director, or our first director, the short timer, I guess, right? Before Jason came on, made an agreement with state parks, and they took rangers who were primarily funded with boating and OHV dollars from the state parks division and moved us into this new division. So we have guys down at Lake Powell, down in Moab, in Cedar City, Weber County, Wasatch back. And we're excited because we have opportunity. We have approved 5 positions to try and hire, so we're trying to fill a second position down at Lake Powell. We have a recruitment that's going out again today. A position at Flaming Gorge, which we haven't had a presence there in a long time. So we're excited to try and find these recreational hotspots that are boating and OHV hotspots through the state where we can kind of fund positions. We'll have a ranger out in kind of the West Desert Tooele area, so heading 5 Mile Pass and Noblets, and hopefully down into Little Sahara, and maybe any help that needs to happen on the Wasatch Front. Another position down in southern Utah. We just hired a guy in Moab, so we'll actually have 2 guys working the river and OHV issues that are that national hotspot of Moab. So we're excited about that as well. But yeah, our focus is is boating and off-highway vehicle law enforcement education throughout the state. We're still partnering with our state parks rangers to be able to continue to do boating on off-highway vehicle enforcement in the state park system. In those parks, so if you go to Deer Creek or Jordanelle or Great Salt Lake or wherever we're typically recreate, you'll still see rangers out there educating the public and contacting the public about boating safety and education. So nice to meet all of you. We're available for, anytime you need to talk to us, or if there's issues through Ty or just us directly, we're happy to talk to you, and we appreciate the help that the Boating Advisory Council does. So, and looking forward to hearing the new announcements that are coming out on this agenda. So there's some good things coming. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Steve. And with that, just to kind of go on, one of the rangers that we brought on, we have a Lieutenant, Brian Curta, that will also be assisting me with the Carrying Passengers for Hire and doing some of the visits and the inspections for the Carrying Passengers for Hire program. That deals with our outfitters and our liveries, making sure that the paperwork and documentation and such is being carried forward with, in essence, the agreed upon rule that this council, some of you were involved with that. Many of the other ones have now ended their terms and moved on, and it was a good riding into the sunset for them to get that rule done. But Brian will be helping with that, and that's, like I said, it's kind of a cool situation that we can have that assistance and being out in the field, and Brian's excited and helping out there. Moving on to legislation, big one. This one is one that really affects the advisory council. So House Bill 299, fourth substitute, is boating amendments, started by Representative Snider in the House, and then sponsored by Senator Bramble in the Senate. This becomes effective January 1 of 2024. And what it does is it diverts 50% of the uniform fee on vessels less than 31 feet to fund the Utah Boating Grant, and provides for the administration of the grant by the Division of Outdoor Recreation. So that's a big thing, pretty similar to what the off-highway vehicle grant did with it. So that annually could kind of move in right about $1.9 million that we can turn around and grant out. What that is that this council is one that makes the suggestions on which grants are the ones that approved and have the awards done of that money that's collected. So that is a big option. Or not a big option, but a big responsibility, and one that will be pulling forth into the future. Also, I want to, before I get into that one, I got to quit looking at that because I want to jump to it right now because there's some other portions of that bill. With that being said, in the future, in our next future meeting, we will be discussing the rule that we'll be reviewing, which will be kind of the governing of what that selection process will be for this boating grant. And we'll work through that. It's going to be on a pretty fast track situation because we are looking at doing a full recodification of all the boating rules. Currently, they are housed under State Parks' numbering system. And so we're going to be pulling those out of the State Parks numbering system and bringing them into the Outdoor Recreation's numbering system and make sure that they're all numbered in consistent ranges and all the holes are filled and the right terminology is used on each one of them. So correct me if I'm wrong, I think there's 26, 27 right around rules that we'll have to be moving, but this is going to be a big one that we need to make sure that we read through. Some of that will probably be email correspondence and stuff to be there, but we'll need to be careful in that situation if we do that, so we take care of the Open Public Meetings Act portion with that. So anyway, the next part of 299 is a piece that got placed in here at the last minute, which started making it it made it the third substitute and the fourth substitute. It is a clarification that an individual can sit or may sit on backwards facing stern seating of a V-drive vessel while an individual is behind the vessel if the vessel is a V-drive with propeller underneath the vessel. And then the individual is in the seat that is 16 years or older. The vessel is operating less than 15 miles an hour, so is not on plane. That is actually creating the wake. And the vessel's engine was built on or after July 1st of 2017, or the vessel has installed a surf pipe or other extended exhaust system that puts the exhaust in the water while under power. So that was a new thing that kind of got put in there, and then it was one that frankly I was a little skeptical about having it be there, but really did not have the data to strongly oppose. So to move things along and to look at, we will continue to monitor it. But literally, we have no data saying that this is bad or good. We just had interpretations of the law at that time. So excited to see where that kind of runs and how that goes. And hopefully it kind of empowers and keeps the sport going with no harm or injury to anybody that's out there. One more, there was part of our budgetary bill, Senate Bill 2, New Fiscal Year Supplement Appropriations Act. Kind of a cool thing. It's not explicitly stated in there, but it is the creation of a boating and off-highway vehicle education specialist. So we have an education specialist back, thank goodness, in the programs there. And so we will be diverting $50,000 from the Boating General Restricted Fund and $50,000 from the OHV General Restricted Fund to pay for that position. And that is ongoing with that, so that's nice to have. And then moving into Senate Bill 112, second substitute. This is a cool one here. I think it gives some opportunities. It's going to be a lot of work out the gate with this. It's the Aquatic Invasive Species Amendments by Senator Sandall. This is a deal where it clarifies the AISV is separate from the registration process. That was one of the issues that we had, that our Utah law did not have that separation, which brought us out of harmony with the Code of Federal Regulations. The United States Coast Guard and has sent letters, general letters out to all the 50 states and 6 territories, as well as at least 2 of our surrounding states have been given notices of non-compliance for not having this separate from their registration process. So in essence, what it does is it creates a decal to be displayed before launching or operating on the waters of the state. It requires residents and non-residents to take an AIS education course. I don't know, is that annual? Have you guys discussed that? Is that an annual or one time? You know?
It's probably going to be an annual.
I was
Probably.
gonna say, it should be an annual.
It'll be an annual with that. Kind of a cool thing. Wish we could see it with boating education, but we'll take baby steps getting there.
No different than what the certificate is now, right?
Pretty much. Pretty much. It's exact same thing with that, so.
Sorry, Mr. Hunter, could you please repeat that for the recording? We were unable to hear that remotely.
Which one was you, where do you need me to start back at?
The part that was missing. You were talking about decal, and then there were some comments
Okay.
from, I believe, wildlife and council members.
Okay, sorry, I turned my head away from the mic. So there's residents and non-residents must take an AIS education course. The discussion that we had was whether that was going to be an annual or one time. That has further come out, but I think under the current circumstances, it is an annual education course, and that is just, in essence, a briefing of what aquatic invasive species are, what the boat operator or owner's responsibilities are, and how they can prevent the spread of this further within the state of Utah. The resident fee, it will be $20 for the resident, and it'll be $25 for a non-resident. It can be paid online or at the time of registration. At the time of registration, it is an opt-in. We were hoping that it could be an opt-out, but the database that Motor Vehicles has does not do an opt-out process. So that's an opt-in process with that. So that helps us with our issue that we had with the Code of Federal Regulations there. There's going to be penalties that come along with if they do opt out that can be addressed either on the water at the time of time that they are launching. That either it can be they don't launch, or they'll have to potentially they can buy it there at that time, or receive a citation for doing it. And I'm not sure what the amounts are with that, and that's the big work that needs to be done between now and July 1st.
So they're gonna get a choice of whether to opt in on this, but yet they can't go boating without it. Correct?
Correct. It's I'll use the term that it was explained. It's a bifurcation of the fees. So the bifurcation means that in federal code, registration can only be contingent upon state and local taxes, titling, and insurance. That's the only things that you can hold registration for. And where we were not giving the choice, and we were saying that if you don't pay your AIS fee, we added one more to that list, which did not make it in harmony with the federal code of regulations. So that's what this all comes into with that.
So somewhat analogous to having a driver's license versus having your car registered?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just kind of a different situation with that, but we'll get through. There's a lot of work, a lot of things to work through, and I'll be assisting, and I'm pretty sure that Chief Bullock will also be assisting Wildlife Resources any way that we can and help out with this and getting this to where this could be stood up and ready to go by July 1 of this year. Now, the fee is actually showing that it is $10 more than what has been paid in that, and for the residents. That fee was actually being paid, except for last year with that. There was a $10 fee that was placed at the time of registration, and then there was a legislative appropriation out of the boating fund for another, in essence, $10 out of the boating fund for that. So a resident was paying $20 at that point in time, except for last year, they were only paying $10 with it. And so with this increase, we have agreed to lower the state registration fee by $10, so it's a revenue neutral. I put that wrong in there. It's not a revenue neutral increase. It's just a revenue neutral bill with it. So it will not be any additional cost to the boater with that. In turn of doing that, that portion there too is there are discussions about looking at a multi-tiered state registration fee, such as bigger boats will pay the full amount, smaller, probably less than 16 feet. This could be the inflatable kick pontoons, canoes, kayaks, and things like that could be paying could be paying less than that full amount with that. And that we have heard from the user groups. I'm pretty sure George has heard that through constituents too with your fishing anglers. This is something that we're trying to address, and we'll be addressing before the effective date of July 1 with it.
Ty, does that change non-residents, if they buy this sticker, does that change their decon process here? So they still will have to pay for the decon?
Well, they won't.
If the boat is not registered, because there's a lot of boats that are in our lakes that are not registered in the state of Utah, particular down in Lake Powell. And those boaters, from my understanding, if you pay for registration here, then you are not responsible to pay for the decon.
No, I don't. Craig, correct me if I'm wrong with this, but I don't think we have any fees on our traditional decon locations throughout the state. Whether you're a Utah resident or a non-resident, we are providing those decons to get done. Now, the issue that comes into it is if it's a complex boat leaving Lake Powell and it's a private entity that is doing the decon at that point in time, that's where a cost is associated, and that is residents and non-residents.
Yeah, so really the only fees that are being charged for decons that I know of are for, those transient boats that are moored boats. When they're being moved long distances and they take them out, they have to be decon before they can be transported.
And because down there, they are not deconning them in the parking lot. If they are a complex boat, we are forcing people to go to a different location to get it decon. Now, from my understanding, there's people that are being charged and people aren't being charged. That's why I was curious if this has, those stickers can give some false pretenses of these people that, you know, well, now I bought this sticker, now I don't have to pay for that. That's what my true question is at.
No.
Yeah, it doesn't have to do, as I understand it, with decontamination. It has to do with your ability to launch.
Just launch. Okay,
Yeah.
that answers my question.
Very good. So with that, like I said, more to come with this. And again, we'll have some fast track things that we will be kind of moving because we really need to get the recodification and these rule modifications done and in and ready to go before July 1. TikTok, we got a bit moving, so.
So is this going to be a calendar year, or is it going to flow along with your registration?
I think the one we have is a calendar year.
I honestly don't know. I mean, ideally, if we're going to start doing it and making it mandatory, it'd be great if it was a 365,
Yeah.
like we have for other licenses throughout the state, but I don't think it is currently.
Okay.
So that's some of the things to come. We'll have a little bit more out with that.
Sounds good.
It'd be nice that, I don't know if it would, the 12-month rotating deal could be crazy with it, but who knows? It could be 365 from the date of purchase. So, anyway, all right. I'm kind of done with my piece. So the 2.3, with that, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Clarify,
Yes.
just looking at the law here, or the bill rather.
I'm going to turn his mic on.
Thanks, Shane. The division shall collect the aquatic, this is the Division of Wildlife Resources. Division of Wildlife Resources shall collect the fee that's imposed, and then in cooperation with Division of Outdoor Recreation and in conjunction with the registration process, that's how
So it'll be a 365.
a 365.
Data registration, or the date of purchase. Thank you, Jason, for that clarification.
Perfect, thank you. So now we would like to move to 2.3. We'll turn the time over to Shane Stroud, who's the Assistant Attorney General, to talk about open public meeting training and resolution.
All right, thanks very much. I have a handout for all of you. And we have a PowerPoint presentation as well. I know that you all came to the meeting today excited to learn about the Open Public Meetings Act. Thank you, Paul. So wait for oh, there it is. Okay, so the reason I'm here is to provide you with your annual training on the Open Public Meetings Act. The law requires you be trained annually on the Open Public Meetings Act, but it's a pretty painless process. The law is a little bit complicated, but compliance with the law is actually pretty straightforward. So if you started looking through the code, which I brought with me, you might be a little daunted. Sometimes I am when I first start reading through it, but I can give you some good tips as to how you can comply and make sure you stay within the law. So what is the Open Public Meetings Act? Well, it's a portion of, OPMA is the acronym for it, and it's a portion of the code that deals with meetings of certain bodies within Utah, including committees, commissions, and councils like you that are created by Utah code. So you probably know this, but there's actually a section of the Boating Act that creates the Boating Advisory Council. The purpose of the act is to make sure that the state and its agencies and boards do their business in public so that they're available for public participation. As you know, we have folks online. I don't know that we have any members of the public online today, but they can certainly come back and look at the video at a later time, or they could be here with us in the room today if they wanted to be. Like I said, the law can be a little bit complicated, but it generally requires four things. Proper notice of meetings, providing the ability for the public to attend, and transacting business in an open and transparent manner, and good record keeping. The nice thing about working with the division is that you have division employees that are highly skilled in the notice requirements and the record keeping requirements. So for the most part, you don't need to worry too much about noticing these meetings in a way that's compliant with OPMA and keeping records in a way that's compliant with OPMA, because the division is going to help you with those two key portions of the bill, and those are actually some of the most complicated provisions in the statute. So you're in a good position there. So what does OPMA apply to? So it applies to meetings of the Boating Advisory Council. That might seem a little self-explanatory, but the question then is, well, what is a meeting? So the meeting is the convening of a public body with a quorum present, including a workshop or an executive session, whether in person or through electronic means, for purposes of taking action or receiving comments or discussing something over which you have purview. So that's a lot of words, but basically what it means is that if you're meeting as a council with a quorum present to do business that the council is supposed to do, it's probably a meeting under the Open Public Meetings Act. But it doesn't include some things like chance social meetings. So if you guys get together, if you guys run into each other at the grocery store and you happen to have a quorum, that's not a meeting under the Act. Likewise, it doesn't apply to social meetings. So if you guys get together to have a dinner or lunch or something like that, that's not a meeting under the Act. Also, it doesn't apply when there's no quorum present. So if it's just, in this case, it would be 3 of you, but generally it'd be 5 of you or less, then, or sorry, 4 of you or less, then that wouldn't be a meeting. And it generally doesn't apply when no public funds are expended and you only discuss things but you take no action. So even if you're out, say, on a visit to a lake on a boat and you had a quorum present and you talked about generally what you would talk about even in a meeting, something over which the Boating Advisory Council has authority. As long as you don't take any action there and you don't expend any public funds, you're probably okay within the law. And we'll talk about this in a little bit, but in those cases, what you'd want to do is just wait until you come into a properly noticed meeting before you take any action. Okay, so when and where does OPMA apply? Well, it applies to all meetings, and there are 2 types here. There are open meetings, which OPMA defines as the convening of a public body, including a workshop or executive session, unless it's closed. So this we're sitting in right now, this is an open meeting. It's open to the public, you're transacting business. Folks can come back and look at the recording or they can participate live. There are also certain meetings that you can close to the public. I highly doubt you would ever have a closed meeting as the Boating Advisory Council, but it's possible. If you do want to close a meeting, there are only a few reasons you can close a meeting. For example, you want to discuss the fitness of a board member to serve as a board member, or their health, or something like that. Or you want to discuss pending litigation, or you want to discuss putting certain security measures in place. There's a list under the code of reasons why you can close a meeting. They're pretty limited. It honestly comes up a lot more with things like school boards and city councils, where they're meeting a lot more frequently. They're discussing, the expenditure of large amounts of funds. But the key to remember here is that if you ever do need to close a meeting, 1, make sure you give notice to the division well in advance so that it can be properly agended and the division can set you up to make sure you can close a meeting. Because you have to have 2/3, you have to have a quorum present, and then 2/3 of those members need to vote to close the meeting. And then when you go into a closed meeting, you have to make sure that it's being recorded and that the names of those who voted to close the meeting are taken down. There are a few other requirements as far as recording where it was and why you did it and who was present. And then in certain circumstances, you need to sign a sworn statement instead of minutes or in lieu of recording the closed meeting. But again, I doubt this is going to apply to you, but if you ever anticipate you need to close a meeting, just make sure you tie the division in early. And then always remember that things like resolutions, rules, contracts, or appointments can't be discussed during a closed meeting. They need to happen during open meetings. So how should you comply with the Open and Public Meetings Act? Well, when in doubt about whether the council is meeting, consult with the division. But I would recommend that you should consider whether or not you're meeting if you have a quorum of the members present. If you do have a quorum present, then you should consider whether it's a meeting that should be noticed. But if it's something that's clearly outside the orbit of OPMA and the meeting requirements, and what I'm talking about here is if you're going to have some sort of dinner, a social meeting, or you're going to have a site visit where you visit a water body or you're doing some sort of activity, that's okay. You can do that. Just make sure you recognize there might be a quorum present. Make sure you don't take any action while you're at that meeting, and you save it for your next council meeting. The second thing you should do is if you're holding electronic meetings, you should consult your electronic meeting policy. We're actually going to talk about that in just a minute. I've prepared this open meeting or the electronic meeting policy for you to consider today and vote on. The reason why is because this is a requirement of the law, and it sets out how you should conduct electronic meetings. Third, if you do anticipate that a meeting will be closed, just identify that, like I said, well in advance and consult with the division so that you can make sure it's properly agended and properly recorded. Ensure proper notice of your meetings, both regular and emergency meetings. Those notice requirements can be found at Utah Code 524202. But again, the division, they do a great job of making sure you're complying with these notice requirements. So when in doubt, consult the division, and we can make sure that you're complying with those notice requirements. This is an important one. Make sure you include all items of business and especially all action items on the agenda. So if you need to take action on something, for example, you need to take a vote on something or you want to consider something officially, it needs to be placed on the agenda. If it's not on the agenda, you can discuss it, but you can't take action on it, which generally means you can't vote on it. So it's really important that if you need to take a vote on something, you have it on the agenda. Need to make sure you keep an audio or audio and video recording of the meeting and that you keep minutes. Again, Paul's great about making sure we keep good audio and video recordings. You've heard him today, making sure that we are. And then the division is great about preparing thorough minutes that comply. But it's good to be aware that those are requirements of the law. You have to keep written minutes of all public open meetings, and you have to vote to approve those minutes at the next council meeting, which you did today. I've been listening as the meeting's been moving along, and so far everything is within the law, so good job there. And then you just need to make sure you keep copies of all materials introduced during the open meetings, because they probably should be posted as part of the meeting's record. Okay, final thoughts. The biggest way to run afoul of the law is by taking action outside of a duly called meeting or by closing a meeting that should be open. And in fact, if you close a meeting that should be open, you can get into trouble. It's actually potentially a criminal violation. Now, again, you're probably not going to be closing meetings, but if you are, that's why it's important to make sure you're tying the division in. And otherwise, if you are going to take action on something, just make sure you're doing it during one of your regularly scheduled council meetings. Take votes by roll call whenever you're holding an electronic meeting. We'll discuss this electronic meetings policy in just a minute, but that's one of the requirements of the electronic meetings policy and one of the requirements of the law. Don't conduct business at social gatherings or site visits. Keep those social and focused on learning. Doesn't mean you can't talk about things. Like I said, just make sure you wait until the next meeting to take a vote or take action. And then remember that allowing public attendance is important. It's the whole purpose of the act, but you don't have to tolerate disruptive behavior. If somebody is disrupting the meeting such that you can't conduct your business, you can remove those individuals. Hopefully that would never become an issue, but it has in the past, and so it's good to know about that. So that's a quick and dirty rundown of Open and Public Meetings Act. Do you have any questions that I can answer about that?
I do have a question. So as I'm taking vote, when we do the aye,
Yep.
should they each be saying who they are, or how do we go about that?
Great question, and that's the next thing I'm going to talk to
It's
you
in
about.
there, okay, perfect.
Yep. So it's a great segue actually to this resolution that I've handed out to you. There was a copy of this resolution that was posted to the website as well. It's identical to this one. The only difference is I wasn't exactly sure who the chair was, and so I left that blank on this so that we could fill it in. But otherwise, that, and I also removed the draft watermark because we're going to sign this, hopefully, if you pass it at the end of this. So let me just tell you a little bit about this policy and why you need to do it. There were some changes to the Open and Public Meetings Act during the 2022 legislative session that required boards and councils, like the Boating Advisory Council, to pass an electronic meeting rule or policy. This kind of sprang out of a lot of meetings shifting online during COVID, and so the legislature made some clarifications as to what we should do when we're holding these electronic meetings. You're probably already doing this, but this is required under the law, so that's why we're passing an official policy as to that. And let me just tell you a little bit about what this does. It requires that you give advance notice to the public and your members about an electronic meeting. So if somebody signals on the council that they want to participate electronically, you need to give notice to everybody about that 24 hours in advance and give them information about how they can participate. It's a link. Again, the division already does this by posting it to the public notice website, so it's not a change from what you're doing now. You also need to make sure you give somebody the physical location if you're going to meet in person, and that's notice of the anchor location. This is your anchor location, as noted on the back part of this resolution. That doesn't mean you can't have a meeting elsewhere. You can. You just have to have an anchor location. If you decide to meet somewhere else, you just notice it for somewhere else and note that the meeting isn't taking place at the anchor location on that day. When you give notice, or somebody gives you notice, I should say, that they plan to participate electronically, the changes to OPMA require that you pass a purpose of this policy is to clarify that if those members participate remotely, they're still counted for purposes of a quorum. So even though they might be online, it's as if they're here for purposes of voting, and this policy makes that clear. And then it also, this is paragraph G on page 2. This is truly one of the requirements that kind of sprang out of COVID. It just says that you can conduct an electronic meeting without a physical meeting space if the chair determines that there's a risk to health and safety. Hopefully we won't ever be in that situation again, but if you are, this would allow the chair to make that decision and hold the meeting entirely online. And then finally, last but not least, to your question, Brett, as far as roll call votes. So one of the changes to the law was that if you do have an electronic meeting where somebody is participating online and you take a vote on something, unless the vote is unanimous, you should take the vote by roll call. Now, if you have a unanimous vote, you technically don't need to take a roll call vote. But I would suggest that it might be a best practice to just take votes by roll call, because then you've made a good record of those votes. And so the way you would do that is you'd say, okay, let's vote on this resolution. I'm going to take votes by roll call. So, can I have a motion on this? Sure. So Robert moves to approve the motion. Do I have a second? Landa seconds. All those in favor, and then just go through the list of attendees and say, obviously you could skip Robert and Landa. They already voted on it. You can say George, aye. George, aye. Whoever else is present, and then you would of course vote if you need to vote to approve the motion as well. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay. So what I would suggest, and we can now test this out, is that you vote to approve this electronic meeting resolution. And then if it is approved, Brett, you can sign it, and then we will include that within the council's files. If you need to change it at a future time, the nice thing about resolutions is they're pretty easy to change, so we could do that. But Hopefully, the law won't change anytime soon, and this will last for a while. Any questions on that? Happy to answer any questions about this or the Open Public Meetings Act training.
Okay. Does not look like there's any questions, so thank you for that. So at this time, we would like to move forward with a vote on the approval of the electronic meeting resolution. Can I have a motion?
I, Robert, will motion it.
Thank you, Robert. And do we have a second?
Lana Visser, seconds.
Thank you. So all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Okay, so that is unanimous there. Oh, any opposed? None opposed. Thank you. So that is unanimous. We will now go to 3.1. This will be with Craig Walker, the Assistant Wildlife Program Chief, in the review of boating access grant applications.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this year, Ty and I have been struggling with how to deal with the burgeoning Division of Outdoor Recreation and our relationship with them for boating access programs, or projects, I should say. Something that I had pressed Nate Owens, my predecessor, to pursue in years past, but he was unable to do so due to his aquatic invasive species duties, is to take stock in what we have statewide, basically take an inventory in what we have in the way of boating infrastructure statewide, so that we properly allocate a portion of our annual budget to the operation and maintenance of existing facilities rather than continue to invest in new facilities, which has the potential for us to end up in a deferred maintenance situation, which is the last thing we want to be in. As part of that effort, I have met with a software company that is the same company that developed our watercraft inspection database initially with the state of Colorado Parks and Wildlife. That is a tool that we use as a state agency in the Division of Wildlife Resources to track boats departing from infested waters and make sure that we don't have them landing in other infested waters. This same company is now on state contract and eligible for us to use without going through a state purchasing bidding process. We have experience working with them, and they developed a proposal that you all should have seen to come up with a database that serves two purposes. One, it serves as a way for us to inventory the existing boating infrastructure that we have out on the landscape in Utah with regard to useful life and get ourselves on a rotational maintenance schedule for those pieces of infrastructure. Secondarily, using those localities and those pieces of infrastructure, we are able to develop a public-facing component or app where individuals would be able to plan their boating trips based upon the amenities available at locations across the state, as well as in the long term have that app dovetail with the watercraft inspection database. So it would be kind of a seamless transition there for individuals as far as their aquatic invasive species decontamination efforts, their sticker efforts, their permit efforts, as well as their trip planning efforts. The idea would be to emulate what we have successfully in the Division of Wildlife Resources put into play, which is the Fish Utah application, trip planning tool. That application not only allows individuals to plan their trip, but also allows individuals to rate their trip, allowing us to keep a finger on the pulse of satisfaction with their boating experiences at various localities throughout the state. Yeah, it's expensive. There is no way around it, but from the mouth of an individual who has tried to cut corners and do the development of apps in an inexpensive way in the past, you pay for it in the way of time. If we want this done in a timely manner, and I don't want there to be a period where we have, an extended period where we have an investment in this infrastructure tracking effort, this boat planning effort, trip planning effort. I don't want that to be protracted and deter from our ability to actually do maintenance and infrastructure development on the ground. And for us to do that, we have to pay upfront. Otherwise, we're going to be working through probably a state agency who are stretched thin and will be out probably 5 or 6 years as far as the development and implementation of that tool. So this would be a way for us to fast track that, as well as work with a trusted partner from a software development standpoint.
Do we have an estimate on the participation rate of our public users for that? Kind of a dollar amount per user?
So right now, I can say this, that using Fish Utah as the model for this, we surveyed our publics last year and found that the Fish Utah app is the #1 way that our anglers in the state of Utah get their information as far as planning a trip and deciding where to go. So, and that's been with, I would say, a limited outreach effort, because we have not fully utilized all of the tools that are available through that app. I mentioned the rating, the ability to assess your trip and provide us with that information. We haven't necessarily promoted that, but by word of mouth, people have found that app to be useful, and it's really become a driver.
So I fish and my boys fish, and I really wasn't aware of this. I have my DWR app for hunting and my licensing there, but I was not aware of a Fish Utah app. So
Hence the outreach effort.
hence the outreach. So, and that would be something, because like you said, as we looked at this, it is a considerable amount of funds. What can we do to make sure that the participation is worth the effort and the dollar per user?
It will be an outreach effort.
Okay.
It's #1, first and foremost. I think one thing that we do have that's a little bit different, the purchase of fishing licenses is somewhat dispersed. It's online, it's at retailers, it's not necessarily all done at a focal point. Boat registrations are pursued at a focal point, right? The Division of Motor Vehicles, right? DMV does it. If we could partner with them and make sure that registered boaters are aware of that as part of their boat registration process, and that this tool is promoted on that, I think that would be a good way for us to provide them with that targeted outreach, if you will, on the use of this. Not to mention the typical information education efforts that we undertake through our sister division outreach efforts on a regular basis.
Thank you.
You're welcome. The second proposal that you all should have had a look at was for the Big Sand Wash Reservoir Road and Parking Lot Improvement Project. I will let you know that I have been in communication with several potential boater project applicants this year. And in each one of my communications, I've informed them that we are not trying to change the typeset while the presses are running, that we want to take stock in what we have in the way of boating infrastructure across the state. We want to make sure moving forward we are investing appropriately in the maintenance of those facilities. And for that reason, we were going to be taking a breather from actual construction projects on the ground. Design, engineering, fine. We can pursue those. That message apparently didn't hit home with one of my own who submitted this proposal. Initially, my understanding was that it was going to be a design and engineering proposal. As I read the proposal, which I'm sure you all have, the design and engineering component for the Reservoir Road and parking lot improvements has already been completed. They are looking for construction. My suggestion, therefore, in a way to be even-handed and not run amok with other applicants that may catch wind of the fact that this proposal has gone through, would be to postpone this proposal as a construction proposal for this year. I have informed Trina Hedrick, the applicant, of that potential, and she is comfortable with that. Just as an FYI. We have made investments in Big Sand Wash this year. We did move, or are in the process of moving and relocating the existing restroom from where it is seated below the dam and actually bringing it up to the boating access site where the ramp is on the dam face. So we are, stepping into the improvements there, call that phase 2, if you will, and then make this phase 3. This isn't walking away from the enhancements there at all. It's just postponing it to allow us to, again, get our head around what we have in the way of needs statewide.
Okay, thank you. All right, so let's start, according to our agenda, with 3.2, which is the Big Sand Wash Reservoir Road and parking improvements. So can I have a motion to approve that? Yes.
This is George. I'll make a motion to approve it.
Okay, so we do have a motion by George. Is there any discussion to the motion?
Hi, Robert here. So you're saying that you want to hold off on this till next year? Is that my understanding?
Yes, so right now we're looking at a price tag of close to $300,000 for this project. My suggestion would be to postpone funding of this project for 1 year, with the understanding that we have suggested to other applicants prior to submission of their application that we would not be funding, in all likelihood, construction projects for the coming year, fiscal year '24. So in a way, to be even-handed among all of our potential applicants to do the same here.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, do we have a second on George's motion?
Lana will second it.
Okay, so uncharted territory here, so,
Well, hey, Brett,
yes.
I can make an amended motion based on Craig's suggestion that we table or postpone this project pending further review.
Okay, I believe that's the way that we feel that we are going to proceed, right? Okay,
Agreed.
okay, yes.
Is that we're postponing it. So I think what you want to do is you would want to make not an amended motion, but
So I'll do that as an amended motion that we postpone this for further review until next year. Is that correct, Craig?
Yes.
So George, are you making a substitute motion that you table this until next year?
I am making a substitute motion to table this project until next year.
Okay, so George makes a substitute motion to table this until next year. Do we have a second on that?
Robert, aye.
Okay, Robert seconds that. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. Appreciate getting through that one. Now the next.
So that, just to clarify, that motion passes unanimously.
There we go.
Correct.
That motion passes unanimously. The next item is the Istonish application development of the boating application. Do I have a motion to move on that?
Lana makes the motion to move on them.
Okay, is there any discussion on the motion? Do I have a second to Lana's motion on that?
George will second it.
Thank you, George. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, any opposed? Okay, that motion is unanimously approved.
Mr. Chair, could I add something to that discussion in there? I know we've already passed it, but just to
Okay, the chair recognizes Craig Walker.
for clarification, so I mentioned the watercraft inspection database being developed by Colorado Parks and Wildlife in partnership with iStonish. That project resulted in the watercraft inspection database being used now by 13 states. The model, as far as cost sharing for this project, would be similar to that watercraft inspection database. The idea is that we, as Colorado Parks and Wildlife did for the WID database, would be the developer in partnership with iStonish for this app. As that app is then presented to adjacent states, other states throughout the nation, as a way for them to potentially take stock of their infrastructure, inventory their boating infrastructure, as well as manage boating access and provide a trip planning tool to their boaters, that cost would then be shared by all of the partnering states as they took on use of that tool. So right now, with the watercraft inspection database being initially housed in Colorado, but now housed in 13 states, the cost annually for maintenance per state is far less than what was initially proposed. So when you start to see maintenance and hosting fees on the order of $175,000 annually, once we expand the opportunity out to other states and they take this tool on, that cost incrementally declines through time. So just a heads up on that.
Thank you for that clarification. Okay, at this time, we'll move on to 3.4, which is the member term review and new leadership nominations. And I believe, Ty, you're taking care of that?
Yes, thank you, Brett. Okay, just to go through, this is the final item that we kind of have to work through. With resignations and such that have occurred with that, some data has been lost. So thank goodness for the Open Public Meeting Act. I've got to go back through and look at previous, the Parks and Recreation Board meetings and get some start dates for some of you. The ones I don't have is George and Lana with that. So I don't have those start dates on those. But I do have the start dates for, let's see here. Actually, I don't have yours either, Brett, with that one there. So I'll get through with those. So right now we've got George, Lana, and Brett. You're going to be coming up in probably your last year of your, no, you're probably going to be you're maybe in the second year, if I remember right, Lana, with that. But you're getting towards the sunset of your first term with that. So we're going to be looking at extending Trent Hickman, who is our paddlecraft representative. He is, I'll reach out to Trent and ask him if he wants to extend to a second term. Robert, you are in a situation where you need to make a decision if you want to extend or not, and we can reach out, and I can do that. Once this is all done, then the process that goes through with this is that I bring this before our director, Jason Curry, and then we advise that outcome of him approving or not approving or whatever happens, his decision of approval. Then we advise the Outdoor Adventure Commission that it has been approved, and then we're good to go in that. And you guys can start that term or the second term up on these extensions if you wish at that time of that approval from the director. So hopefully I didn't make that any more confusing than what I was trying to say here. I feel like I've been just chasing my tail in a circle here and I'm dizzy. So anyway, so really what we're looking at right now, we are minus a chairman. We have a vice chair that is acting as chairman. So it is an opportunity amongst the four of you to make a decision of, maybe who's going to hear the bus that's going to hit them or not. I don't know what you want to do with that. I'm going to say, are there some responsibilities that are going to be with it? Yes. If we're up and rolling and doing these types of things, this is where the chair and the vice chair are communicating. I would really like it to where it's not the programs calling the meeting, it's this body that's calling the meeting. I would really like it that this body, you're here, you're an advisement council, you are the ones that are there, and we're looking at having a meeting on X date because we want to accomplish this, or I reach out to the chair and say, hey, we have, as a program, I'm needing advisement on these items. And so with that, in getting that advisement on these items, could you call a meeting and could we address these items so we can get them in here to help out with further decision, with that decision making that could be affecting things into the future. Plus, as I mentioned, we've got to make a decision with the rule in here. Are we going to go an annual approval for grants or a biannual approval for grants? Or whatever we need to do with that. That's something that needs to be decided at that point in time. That's where your body's going to be very, very critical in making sure that projects similar to the boating access projects are being read through, and then that money is being appropriated to them. And it will be good to have applicants, and it'll be good to give all the money away annually to qualified applications that are there. So, I mean, this is not just to store and build a bank account. This is to get the money that you all pay as boaters to, basically in your local fees, your age-based, length-based fee, to get that to hit the ground. So it's even more of a pay-to-play that can happen with that. We can get it in places to be able to improve that access. I'll have to remember on this, Shane, you can help me with this, the items on 299.
Yeah, that was going to be my question, is what are eligible projects?
Do you have them
under
listed down,
299?
or I can look up 299? The new voting grant.
I don't have the categories off the
Okay, here, I'll,
Those will be included within the new rule.
yeah, they'll be included in the new rule. I know right now we have, in essence, boating access related type of things here to improve access, to mitigate any type of shoreline erosion that could be occurring. Then the other one is to search and rescue. I think the way it was specified as a search and rescue entities with that can get that can have money awarded to them on that, and it's setting the percentages of how each one of these categories and columns could be placed in there, and then awarding that. So that could be to the 29 counties that are responsible for search and rescue in the state of Utah with that they can have out of that. Also, there's a portion of that money that is collected for the administration of that. So that would probably be, not probably, that will be a full-time individual that is responsible for running that grant, informing, training, and outreach of getting applicants to apply for this money. But then also, and that is looking through and putting it together, putting these, these documents together, making sure that we conform to the Open Public Meetings Act, and having them placed in before the meetings, and that person would be taking a lot of the seat to where I specified that JC will be temporarily taken care of until that position comes into place. So that'll in essence be the, I don't know if we would call it the secretary, but we could call it the secretary for this body with that. So that's kind of a neat thing. So in essence, we can have this run as a body. I am personally looking at things as a quarterly meeting. If we can get back on that quarterly meeting schedule instead of this annual, we've got to do something because we cannot effectively take care of these things.
I agree.
And now with all of this, all of these changes that have occurred right now, there's a lot to do. So it's there. Shane, you have something?
Yeah, so Mr. Chair, can I just speak to what Ty was talking about as
Yes,
far as the
please.
uses? So there's 5 uses besides the administrative costs that Ty was mentioning. The first is construction, repair, and replacement of boat access facilities. The second is resource protection of waterway shorelines from erosion caused by vessel wave action. The third is drought access mitigation. The fourth is alternative access development for non-motorized vessels to decrease conflicts, congestion, and safety concerns on existing boat ramps. And then the fifth is search and rescue. So those are the 5 various categories. And like Ty said, those will be included within the new the boating grant administrative rule. And there'll be guidelines within the rule as to how the Boating Advisory Council and the division considers those various uses and then administers grant monies in line with those considerations.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, can I pose a question as to what we interpret drought access mitigation to be?
Yes, go ahead.
May I put a little bit in on that one? I would look at drought access, so that's accessibility. So if we're chasing water, it's where we can chase water with ramps and you understand what I'm saying?
Pretty much to get to the water.
To get to the water.
I struggle with that one a little bit because we probably, when we're talking about investing, right, this is an investment in a long-term solution. Lake Powell isn't necessarily a wise investment. I mean, we're going to see it come up a little bit this year, but draw a trend line through the past 30 years, and you can basically, I can tell you when it's going to be a river, unless a miracle happens and we magically come out of the mega drought that we're in. Those types of situations, continually, perpetually chasing water, those are not where we, I think, as stewards of the public's money, want to be investing. And I think that's a serious conversation that we need to have. It doesn't say, that we are mandated to do it, but it's definitely a conversation that we've got to be aware of coming up, that we can't just keep building ramps that.
The water will never
Right.
see again.
Yeah, right. I mean, anyway, those types of conversations are coming.
If I may, also within that law, it explains who can receive the grant. I think Shane's going to look that up too, so I make sure I do not misquote this one right here. This originally started out that the federal government was a recipient. That was removed early on in the bill with that. So the federal government is not a direct recipient. That could be, it could be however we work through within the way the rule states with that. Go ahead, Shane, if you.
Yeah, so there are only 4 eligible entities under the current legislation. It's a water conservancy district, that's the first, a state agency, the second, a county is the third eligible entity, and the fourth is a municipality. So it's actually a very limited number of entities that are eligible for grant. The federal government is not one of those entities.
Unfortunate, but that was, again, when we play with the political environment and stuff there with that, so.
That actually works out fairly well because it emulates what we've got in the way of wildlife, sport fish restoration dollars for boater access funding from Fish and Wildlife Service. So eligibility seems to be in alignment with that, and as far as subrecipients is what I'd call them. Subrecipients cannot be the federal government either.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, and that's something.
The amount of money that's combined between boating access and rescue grant.
Yeah, so a question that was brought up here by our, by Steve Bullock. The amount, I think I did talk about this before, but this amount is projected to be looking at $1.9 million annually with it that can be placed out. So, I mean, really with a lot of these projects, that's not a whole lot, but we start looking at what we do boating access wise, and we are $1.1 million annually?
So on average, I'd say we're probably $900,000 to $1 million annually for WISFR, Wildlife Sport Fish Restoration Funds coming for boater access, combined with your 1.1 combined and used to leverage potentially outdoor recreation grants, this is really a boon for boater access in the state.
It's something to go, and there's not limitations with it. So this is cool, and it's out of anything too. It could be looked at as this is state dollars, and where this boating access is federal dollars, these state dollars could be utilized as a match, a qualified match for that. Instead of looking at circumstances where we were hitting and looking and saying, okay, well, the state annually has, at least the Division of Outdoor Recreation right now, has $350,000 that is set aside for that each year for a matching fund out of that. This just amplifies that piece along with the other grants through the Division of Outdoor Recreation that are currently already up and running and going. So, like I said, January of 2024, this is a really neat thing, and there'll be a lot of responsibility for us all to go through and read and understand. And I really think a lot of it, we've got to have good, firm definitions of what is qualifying, what is not, and that's where we'll be looking into the boating access interpretations of this. We could even be reaching out to the, help me, SOBA, what's SOBA stand for? State Organization of Boating
Access.
Access. I missed the last one on that acronym, but they have a good place that we can kind of look at that. And then, like I said, the pioneers of this particular type of legislation and rulemaking has been with our off-highway vehicle program. And we can look at a lot of things there and kind of see how they've kind of likened that in the dirt world. And where's the do's and don'ts? There's no sense of starting off with, a square wheel. Let's get something that's a little more rounded corners so it would run a little bit better for us. So anyway, but that's all I have at this time, other than we do need you guys to look and decide what you want to do on voting for a chair and vice chair.
Okay, so let's open a discussion about that. Does anybody have any comments they'd like to make on the discussion about a new chair and new vice chair?
Robert here. Should we wait till we have other seats filled? I know, I'm looking at the board now. I'm looking at us.
Right, and so a couple other seats to be filled, as well as Jason and Trent online here. I mean, I'd love to throw somebody under the bus, but I think the last time I did, I ended up in this position.
I think you did too.
Boomerang.
Lana, do you have any comment? Or George, any comment?
Well, I kind of agree with Robert but we ought to figure out where everybody sits and all of the positions we have to fill, and then try and do everything at once. So we're not doing part here and part then. If we can, at our next meeting, maybe you could Ty could send out the information on who's up, who we need to replace, and then by the next meeting have hopefully some applicants and go through the process of selecting those applicants, a chair and a vice chair.
I like that. Robert, do you have a comment?
I think I agree with him 100% that, we could try and decide those right now, but if we bring somebody on that could potentially fit the position better than who's here now, that's what I'm waiting for to see, is there a potential for somebody that could fit those seats that are going to be coming on?
I agree. I'd like to see all the positions filled before we try to do that.
And then we'll make the decision of who's going to be the head.
Right. Yep.
So, and you might have to help us with Robert's rules and some of this a little bit, kind of going through, and I've got to look, I think, see if we're, if you're willing, make sure we're
Yes.
not breaking the rules through all
Yes,
this.
please.
We'd love to,
So if you can, may I say something, Mr. Vice Chair?
Yes, you may.
Again, Shane Stroud, Assistant Attorney General. it sounds like the board is leaning towards keeping things status quo until you filled some more seats on your board, at which time you might vote on a chair and a vice chair. So if I could, maybe my recommendation would be that instead of voting on a chair and vice chair today, somebody make a motion to allow Brett to continue to serve as the acting chair until such time as you elect a new chair and new vice chair.
Okay, thank you. So at this time, do we have anybody that would be willing to make that motion to leave me as acting chair until we progress forward on this?
I, Robert, make that motion to have Brett stay in the position as acting chair right now.
Okay, thank you, Robert. Do we have a second?
George will second it.
Thank you, George. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Any opposed? Okay, so that motion will be approved unanimously. Unanimously. I'm in the same circles. I apologize here. Maybe I'm a little bit overwhelmed and I'm still going to be here, but we're good. We're good. Thank you. So at this time, looking at our agenda here, it looks like that will be an adjournment. Do we have a motion to adjourn this meeting today?
I, Robert.
Okay, Robert, thank you. Do we have a second?
I will second it, Lana.
Thank you, Lana, second. So all those in favor to adjourn the meeting today? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we will now adjourn. That motion is approved unanimously.